Welcome back to Earth Station Trek, a show where we trek from the early days on NBC to the future on Paramount Plus and everywhere in between. I'm Charles Kelso, and it's my privilege to introduce the Earth Station Trek crew: Keith Johnson,
Herbert.
Alan Seiler,
I don't have anything clever, so yo, what's up?
Veronica Dashel,
Hi, and Muffet says hi too.
and we're joined by some special guests tonight from Elaine and Matt Watch TV. It's Matt Sweatman.
Hello, guys.
And Elaine
Hi.
Welcome back to the show, guys.
I was going to say I have nothing witty to say, but then Alan said he had nothing clever to say, so I really had nothing to say.
The intro is just to make sure no one thinks we rehearse these shows before we go.
Right.
All right. And I forgot to ask before we started, but Alan, do we have any news this week we wanted to touch on?
No.
Okay. How about This Week in Trek?
No, I figured we'd just talk about season 3.
Awesome. Then we're going to get right into it and talk about the third season of the original Star Trek series. Now, we recently watched the third season of Picard, and we're waiting for the third season of Strange New Worlds. But this week it's the original third series, the infamous third series.
Yeah. The infamous, the
That's right.
uneven, the unpredictable season 3.
Yeah, as many may know, one thing about season 3 was many of the principals were gone from the original series. Gene Kuhn had quit. Gene Roddenberry had been so disgusted with NBC because they had promised him a plum spot, but he ended up on a dead spot, like on Friday night. So Gene Roddenberry pretty much wasn't involved much. He would come in and like rewrite shows and tell people stuff sucked, but he wasn't really involved. And then you had, was it Fred Freiberger?
Freiberger?
I think it's
Freiberger.
Yeah.
Freiberger. He took over as the showrunner. And it's very interesting. Most people blame Fred Freiberger for the season 3 quality being low. But I've read interviews with a lot of the cast members, Nichelle Nichols, George Takei, Walter Koenig. They said that he was actually a really lovely man and did the best he could do. However, the budget was cut by as much as 15 to 20% per episode. The network demanded that they cut as much as 1 to 2 days off the shooting schedule for every episode. And they demanded a lot of money to be saved. And I think all those things combined, especially DC Fontana has stepped back as well. So you lost the principals, you lost money, you lost time, and Gene Roddenberry was pretty much pissed at everybody. And I think that's what season 3 came out of.
Another really interesting fact about Mr. Freiberger is that he's very, very well known for taking over season 3 of TOS, but he's also probably secondarily best known for taking over season 2 of Space 1999, which, if you look at, is very different from its first season in a lot of the same ways that Star Trek's third season is different from its first 2. And he introduces a new alien bridge character because he felt Space 1999 needed a Spock. So it's a really interesting compare and contrast between those two, like his two biggest high profile jobs for television.
Yeah. And I think he had a lot to do with it, but I mean, like you say, Keith, it wasn't just his fault. It was a lot of against him. I mean, and in television, especially, I mean, cutting money and time is not only impacting the special effects, the wardrobe, the writing, but I mean, you have less time for rehearsals. You have less time for blocking and setup. You have to go with more simple camera setups. You have to move the show along. And I mean, there's a lot to criticize, I think, about season 3, but I think there's a lot of gems in there too. I think there's a lot of good quality material that they've made.
Absolutely. And of course, one of my absolute favorite TOS episodes is in this season, and a couple of other ones that I really think are true standouts for the original series.
Right.
Well, that was something I had said when we were watching, and I don't know specifically which episode, but there were 2 or 3 episodes where I felt like, okay, this could have been a really good episode. The story, like the bones were there, but they just they didn't do what they needed to do with it. But also, watching Doctor Who, there's a lot of stories in Doctor Who that they could have been really great stories, but they didn't have the budget, they didn't have the time, they didn't, so.
Right.
So let me get our first comment. This is from Dan Leckie, all the way in Scotland, and he says, hello everybody, and he says, it was a pleasure to have Matt and Elaine on the writing staff of Warp Factor Trek, and they are excellent reviewers. So I'm just curious, in your reviews, how did you spell?
PBTHHHH. I guess I don't know.
No, I think that's.
We did that a lot in the third season as well. Yes.
Wow, Keith, you got that all the way over here.
But Charles and Alan make a really good point about season 3 being really good despite itself, because we were just talking the other day. Look what happened to Lost in Space.
Oh, don't.
Yeah. Look what happened to. Look what happened.
Lost in Space yet in this episode.
Yeah.
Don't trash my favorite show.
Well, Irwin Allen shows Lost in Space and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, they became kind of jokes in their final seasons. They had all these silver-faced aliens. They were really goofy. And the fact that Star Trek held on to the quality it held on to is a minor miracle. Also, I'm sure you all know, the network was seriously thinking of turning Star Trek, the live series, into a Saturday morning series. And they survived a lot to produce what we did get for season 3.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting fact, again, about Mr. Freiberger that Michael Phillips throws in here. He oversaw the final season of $6 Million Man. So basically, if you hire this guy, your show is done. How many final seasons does he have on his CV?
Right.
Wonders.
And that begs the question, did he have innately bad taste, or was he just a good guy doing what they demanded of him to save money and rush things through?
Well, and that's the thing, because the original series had been on the chopping block already. And, everybody knows the story about the fan letter writing and stuff. And we all know that it wasn't renewed for a 4th season. So was he there as a caretaker?
Yeah.
Just to, as the show limps to its finish line, is he just there to oversee that last home stretch?
Yeah, because a big part of being a producer is not just the creative aspect, but it's getting the show out on time with the budget that's allotted and the time allotted.
Absolutely.
And keeping and famously, the 3rd season of Star Trek gave them enough episodes for that syndication deal. And the show came to life at syndication. Like, who knows if he hadn't produced that 3rd season, if we'd be sitting here right now.
Probably not.
Wow.
Yeah, my impression of him is that, and I don't know how correct this is, but he's a veteran in the industry. He's probably someone that the network's comfortable with, and the various production companies are comfortable with. He may not necessarily be a true believer in a sense of the Star Trek ethos, but he's professional and familiar enough with the ins and outs of producing television to get a season out. So I think that's what he did.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And now for Elaine and Matt, you guys on Elaine and Matt Watch TV, you guys do watch alongs. And then Matt, you've been going through and ranking the 3rd season in our Facebook group, which seems to be a very popular feature that people seem to really look forward to.
You get a lot of engagement on those posts.
Yes.
Which is fantastic.
Absolutely.
It's very good. Very good. I'm very pleased with that.
Yeah. Well, what was your experience with the 3rd season of Star Trek, really for both of you, before this recent watch through?
I will tell you, I don't think I had seen a single one of those episodes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Even because I was thinking about it. I'm like, the ones I normally would see in reruns or whenever they would have marathons would be Trouble with Trouble, like the really popular, famous ones that everybody knows. No, I don't know that I saw any of those before we watched these.
Very interesting.
Yeah, that didn't hit me, but I was watching through the season today because I was working from home and I just had it playing while I was working. And now that you said that, I was like, oh yeah, you know what? Actually, I don't think most of these I've seen before. I mean, a couple of them I do.
That's amazing.
Well,
you
probably had and just don't remember them. So.
Usually I can be like, yeah, okay, I kind of remember that. But there were several of these like I've never seen this.
That's amazing to have new Trek from that old long ago.
These are episodes that I watched on a loop when I was like 12 years old. But the fact that someone doesn't know every syllable of these things is fascinating to me. Like, because it's a different experience watching a show as an adult than it is watching a show that you love when you're 11 and you watch over and over again.
I mean,
through an adult eyes, it's very different.
Yeah, so that means Elaine and Veronica were stunned to see Alexander riding Kirk like a horse. Can you imagine seeing that for the first time? Wow.
Elaine, what did you think of the third season of Star Trek?
Well, before we came on, I had a list of the episodes, and Matt had to give me little clues to what each episode was, because I'm kind of like, I don't know what that title, I don't know. And so I ended up writing my own notes on some of them.
Mm.
And there are some that are forgettable only because it's just an episode.
Because
I mean, it's not a, you know,
Yeah.
because there's one that I was like, oh, the Bill and Ted episode. Okay, I remember that one now. You know, it's like,
Wow.
Yeah.
you know, I have to remember them certain ways, because sometimes they just kind of blend all together, and I don't remember which one, which.
Okay. Well, what
But,
jumped
yeah.
out at you?
Hey, let me look at my papers over here.
Clearly, the Bill and Ted episode did.
Yeah. Well, that was a Requiem from Methuselah, and that's the one that had Abraham Lincoln, and they were collecting all the
Savage Curtain.
Savage Curtain.
Oh, I don't know. I'm looking at the wrong thing. Sorry. Requiem from Methuselah. No. Oh no, I remember what that one is now. I looked at my notes. No, Savage Curtain, because they were collecting all the historical people, like Bill and Ted did for their project. So yeah,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I have never seen Bill and Ted.
Get out.
Ever. Any version. So I didn't know the reference.
Okay.
Bill and Ted, they're high school students that need to pass a history final, so they get in an American phone booth and travel through time and space.
Yeah.
Doctor Who, and gather all the historical figures and take them back to their high school and do a history project with Napoleon, Joan of Arc,
Genghis Khan.
Socrates, Socrates,
Socrates,
and you know, yeah.
Hey,
that was.
And it's a hugely important movie because Jane Weedland of the Go-Go's plays Joan of Arc.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Actually,
I'm down with that.
It's a really smart sci-fi movie.
It really is.
It's like a teen comedy.
Yeah,
it sounds funny.
Yeah.
It sounds like a funny movie.
It's really good.
Wayne says hello and says late again. Nope, Wayne, you are right on time.
You didn't miss anything, Wayne.
Just like a hobbit, whenever you arrive, a wizard, whenever you arrive, that's exactly when you mean to arrive.
Right.
Marine, you're late.
Question for Matt. What was your experience with the third season of Star Trek before this recent watch along?
Well, I'm very familiar with everyone, but mostly from the late 80s and early 90s when I was really heavily into watching the reruns. They would still broadcast them in the afternoon, and that was my afternoon plan, was to watch. So I kind of watched them out of order. So the third season, second season, first season all kind of gets blended together in my memory.
Right.
Some episodes went a little bit up in my estimation, some went down, but for most parts, the ones I really couldn't stand, I still couldn't stand, and the ones I really liked, I still really liked.
Okay.
Did anything surprise you? Like, did you have a very different take on an episode that different from what you would have originally? And when you were doing your season rankings, were you surprised by where something fell on your list?
A couple. I was surprised by how well I enjoyed Requiem for Methuselah. I actually it went quite a ways up. Was it 4 or 5? I think on my list, which I think is higher than most people would put that episode. And much to I had to sort of balance out the Empath, because that is one that kind of dropped in my estimation in the rewatch, and I know Chuck loves it.
My man.
It's still in the middle of the season. It didn't drop to the bottom, but it wasn't quite as high as I anticipated it being. I was thinking of it going in on a is there in truth no beauty level, but I can't rank it up in that nearly as there in truth no beauty. Unfortunately,
I can.
And he has before.
I want to piggyback real quick, Alan. That's a great question about Requiem for Methuselah, because there are some shows that when you're younger, they don't mean as much to you as when you're older. And I remember watching Requiem for Methuselah as a child. It was fine. I started watching Star Trek when I was 6 years old. It was fine. It was just okay. I've always loved history, so I love the reveal. But I noticed as I got older, just the way that the actor was was acting his role. I see the loneliness in him. I felt the desperation in him, and also you saw the danger that he could be, because at the end of the day, he is a 6,000-year-old guy who was born in a savage time, and you saw both a man of, like McCoy said, a man of great wisdom and knowledge, but he could also do some really, really scary things. And the show resonates with me much more as an adult than it did as a child. I have to completely ignore the nonsense of Kirk falling in love with a woman in like 2 hours while his ship is dying and telling her, come with me. But other than that, it's a really good episode. So like Matt, my estimation has gone up over the years.
Yeah, I think the whole falling in love bit that's kind of a 60s television thing. Every week, I mean, you come back to the Bonanza where the kids had their love of their life, and they would always die at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
So it always had to be the most important love of their life, week in, week out. So
Right.
I think that's sort of that kind of at play in that regard.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I didn't really bump up against when I was a kid watching the show. And there's a lot of things like that. You revisit something that you loved when you were young that, didn't bother you at the time. Then you're watching it as an adult and you're like, well, that's not what you got to do.
Right.
Yeah, there's a reason I haven't seen an episode of Dukes of Hazzard since the early 80s.
That's probably smart.
Wait, Matt, you talk about me for bringing in different shows? I have never gone to a Dukes of Hazzard reference.
I think it's the first for our podcast.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
Were there any episodes that you thought were just stinkers?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And the children shall lead, but I'm not alone in that regard.
No.
Turnabout Intruder, I'm not alone in that regard.
Yeah.
I mean, those two were particularly bad. I mean, and I like to say that even the bad ones, I tried to focus on something positive.
Absolutely.
And what Star Trek always banked on in the first two seasons is, because we love the characters so much, we always had that to fall back on. It's a Kirk, it's a Spock adventure, McCoy and Spock. But the episode in this season, it seemed like they slipped a little bit on the characterization at times. They weren't as solid as they were in the first two seasons. So you didn't always have that security in that you would find something to enjoy in every episode.
Yeah. And you speak about the characters. I mean, you introduced a new feature in your ranking this season, which was the Spock Dignity ranking, which I thought was an interesting feature.
Yes.
So what prompted you to add that?
Well, when I think of the third season, I think of Spock's brain with him being controlled, remote control. I think of Plato's Stepchildren, where he's made to cry, nearly dance, and stomp on Kirk's head. Right. You think about all these really embarrassing Spock moments. It's almost like at times they were just torturing him. So I thought it'd be kind of cool to play around with. But actually, there are some episodes. I think it's not as many as I thought. It's like it's like we always go back and think of the third season as being really embarrassing for Spock, but there's really only 3 or 4 really bad ones.
Yeah. Well, how do you think Spock? I mean, how did the season portray him? I mean, how did he come out at the end? Do you think that did it lower your esteem for Spock, or do you think he made it through?
Inconsistent.
Okay.
At times they seemed to like. There was one episode, and I can't remember exactly which one it was, but he was taking everything very literal to the point to where Spock, you've been humans enough. You can catch the subtext. You're just being stubborn this episode.
Exactly.
I think it was the episode where he commented on Scotty literally sitting on an engine. I think that's the episode.
Oh, yeah. That position would not only undignified, but would avail you nothing. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, that doesn't make sense.
Right.
And then there's one
data where he doesn't understand idioms.
Yeah. And is it the episode? Is there a No Truth Beauty where they have to get back to the planet? And there's a woman. She's an Indian woman, Hindi woman. She's at the helm, and Spock keeps yelling at her. And I remember somebody online said, "Why was he being so incredibly rude again to this woman?" It's something like she said, "We're 900 light years away," and he'd say 901.357. I wish you would get it accurate. And it's like, okay, it's a little out of character for Spock at this time. So you're right, he was a little inconsistent.
Yeah,
Well,
like that's not what matters right now.
So
Yeah.
maybe that was Spock's way of joking around and tricking humans, kind of like Ethan Peck Spock's did with Nurse Chapel that one time. And he's like, humans are even more easily fooled than Vulcans.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, I've got a question for Matt and Elaine from Dan. He wants to know, now that you have an overview of the original series, how well do you think Enterprise ties into TOS?
Fairly well. I don't think there's any major inconsistencies. I find myself more than ever wanting a crossover with some of the characters and actors from Enterprise somewhere, somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the direct link with the Tholian Web and the Mirror Universe episode from Enterprise.
In the Mirror Darkly.
Yeah, that's it. And so I think they're fairly compatible. I mean, it clearly in Rick Berman era, they had their continuity pretty solid at that point. And they were very conscious of trying to keep things consistent, probably more so than they are today, honestly.
Definitely.
For good and for bad, because I think sometimes you can tie your hands too much and kind of lose focus on making a good TV show if you're worried so much about continuity.
Exactly.
Right. Elaine, that's a good question for you, but not outside the continuity. Now that you look at season 3, what do you think about that season overall and just the series overall, all 3 seasons put together?
Season 3 were definitely the weakest link by far. Because I was not familiar with it. And I don't know if it hurts or helps that I was not familiar with any of the episodes from this season. There are a few if it was on TV, I'd watch them again. But well, actually, I'd probably watch any of them. I might just grumble about a couple of them. Why do we have to watch this one? I don't want to watch this one. But and as far as like linking Enterprise to it, I don't know that I really thought about that, because to me they're so far apart. Not because Enterprise was more recent than TOS, just like where they fit in the timeline. My brain, like, I keep asking Matt, how far apart is this from this show, or like how many years have passed? Because I don't have a reference for that, so I don't.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that the canon continuity thing is literally the biggest argument in the Trek world right now, and I think some people start. It's like the North and the South of the guy. I should know the name of that famous little Southern guys in Appalachia who fought the
Hatfields and McCoys.
Thank you. I can't believe I don't remember that. But I agree with Matt. I mean, I like them to try to stick to continuity and history as much as possible, but you can't bind your arms. Case in point was Enterprise. They were like, how do we do the controls? Because the whole look of the ship was designed in the 60s. So if as Enterprise does weird thing like bring knobs back, just trying to make it look more primitive than the 60s, which kind of sort of doesn't make sense. So, you do what you have to do. And Veronica, what did you think overall, since you were a newbie to the overall season and the overall series?
I was really enjoying a lot of the episodes. There were some weird moments and some strange concepts, but I felt like they were good concepts, like the little floating light that was making everyone angry and lived off everyone's fighting. It was really weird, but it was a good concept. Not sure how well it was executed, but I
think it was executed pretty well. I like that episode a lot.
Absolutely.
That may be my favorite Klingon episode from the original series. I mean,
agreed.
Errand of Mercy is really good too, but yeah, I mean, you get like the Klingons of Day of the Dove really feel like what would later become Klingons. They're fighting with swords, and they are. Kang seems more of an honorable figure than any of the Klingons we've seen up to that point. It seems like he's really more the archetype for what the Klingons were going to become later on in the Worf era.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kang and Kor are the two sides of Klingons, because you're right. Kang is the honorable, the serious Klingon, the Worf type, and then Kor is the bloodthirsty one who probably would yell, "Today is a good day to die," or as we saw in TNG, Klingons like to party the night before a battle. That's Kor.
Right. Right.
I don't want to think where we put Koloth in this conversation, but
I like Koloth. I could go off about Koloth, but he's in the wrong season.
And then there's two. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead, Alan.
Well, I was going to pitch another question out to the guests, and that is, since we've talked about Kirk a little bit and Spock a good bit, I'm curious to know how you think season 3 represented some of the, lesser characters, and I hate saying it that way but they're not on equal playing field. So I'm curious to know how you feel like Uhura, Chekhov, Sulu, those characters are portrayed in season 3. Did you see any furtherance of their characters? Were they developed well? Were they just there for saying a line? How do you think?
I remember there was one episode I was thinking, oh, hey, look, Uhura's actually given something to do. And that was when Kirk was in the ship that was out of phase and she saw him and she had a reaction and she actually had something to do. And actually, Chekhov had something to do in that same episode.
That's the Tholian web.
Yeah,
that's one of my favorites. It's also, Veronica, you're saying that it's funny because one day I really want to do a poll who has the craziest scream in Star Trek, because if you remember, Chekhov is in medical bay and he's screaming a whole lot, and I love to see it. It's unintentionally funny when Spock said Kirk is dead and he goes, "And I like the captain," and he starts and it does that cool camera angle when Spock does the thing with the R's. He's like, Chekhov.
Yeah.
Well, Matt and Elaine, what did you guys think?
I thought Uhura and Chekhov did come off pretty well, actually, compared to other seasons. Uhura, I mean, it seemed like he were deliberately trying to give Uhura some things, and that's a good thing. I like that. Sulu, I think I've heard interviews with George Takei, and I think he thinks that sort of they forgot about him after he came back from filming the Green Berets.
Right.
And he does. I mean, we actually had more episodes with Sulu and Chekhov because it seemed like in the second season they were hardly ever on the bridge together.
Right.
But we had a lot more of that in this season. But Sulu just didn't feel right, and there was a lot of Scotty, but Scotty kind of became a caricature in season 3.
Yeah.
I mean, and they played up the alcohol use. They played up his romance or two. Kind of were a little awkward, a little rough.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we did get overall more episodes with all 7 of them, and that was something we hardly ever saw before this.
Right. And that's always good to see. And so the reason that I was thinking of that question is because I don't know, a year, maybe longer than that, we did an episode on our show about Spock's brain, where we sort of did a rewatch of it, and Spock's brain gets a bad rap. Probably the worst rap of any of the TOS episodes. And as we were rewatching it, I was kind of surprised by how much good stuff we were able to find in it. And one of the things that stuck out to me is that Chekhov had a lot of scenes and some really good material was given to him, which, for the opening of a season 3 episode, that's surprising that he got as much screen time as he did. So I was just curious to know how you felt about those characters being treated this season.
And I'd like to get Elaine's opinion on that, but I want to comment on what you said there, Alan and Matt, real quick. If you read the behind the scenes stuff, the number of episodes that were originally written for Sulu, which were rewritten for Chekhov, is pretty high because the Green Berets ran long.
Yeah.
And when they got Walter Koenig there, to what you were saying, Alan, they realized this guy's really good. He's a good dramatic actor. He's a good comedic actor. Yeah. And so when George came back, he honestly was upset and he felt like they had done him wrong, but he went away on the movie and they had to use a character. And so I remember reading about at least 6 episodes where Sulu was supposed to be prominent and they wrote it for Chekhov instead because they didn't know when he was coming back.
Yeah.
Wow.
So Elaine, what do you think?
I'm trying to remember. I do feel like it seemed like McCoy and Scotty had more chances of having the love of the week kind of thing. It seemed like they had. It wasn't always just Kirk. They spread the love a little bit.
Baby, did they ever?
Well, McCoy even gets married.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
and what happened?
Even something like in Way to Eden, which we talked about on our Facebook group just recently, was originally DC Fontana's pitch was for an episode called Joanna, and the romance was going to be more between Kirk and McCoy's daughter, which would cause friction between Kirk and McCoy. But that was written for a romance for Chekhov instead. So it's interesting that they were taking, at least in that instance, a romance for the lead and giving it to a supporting character, which I think for the hippies episode, I mean, Chekhov was really. They were trying to reach some youth audience with that character.
Yeah.
They were trying for some of the monkeys audience. They were trying for, it makes sense that he would be the one to interact with, the youth movement of the 23rd century.
Right.
Such as it was.
I love that.
But there's a lot of episodes that I think get bad raps in the third season that are not bad episodes, they're fun to watch. They're the fact that the bar was set by Star Trek Up Here earlier in the seasons is held against it. But I mean, most of the episodes, even like Spock's Brain you mentioned, is a fun episode, and the characters are fun, and the interactions are fun.
Yeah,
yeah, that's the way I felt.
Yeah,
I think the only episode for the entire series, the original series, that I will not watch again, and not if somebody put it on, I'm not going to protest. It really is in the Children's lead, because to what you're saying, Charles, it just does nothing for me. I don't hate it. It literally just does nothing for me, and it's the only episode that I haven't seen since 1986. I just haven't seen it again.
Where the children were running around and skipping and singing on the black play.
Yeah, they were conjuring the Gorgon.
And they were just going like shaking their fists.
That's the one.
Someone on a Facebook group recently was criticizing Captain Pike for losing control of the Enterprise. And I was like, Captain Pike lost control of the Enterprise to what the middle schoolers once.
Most of them weren't even middle schoolers. Like one of them was maybe a middle schooler. Well, he was probably middle school. They were like elementary school.
But even you get some kind of interesting looks at a Federation colony and the Federation planet from that episode. I mean, in a lot of these episodes, there's still something that I can find that I enjoy in it.
Yeah. That one, I was going to say in that one, Elaine commented on, they had the ice cream machine in the little commissary.
Right.
You've never really seen that set before, so that's something.
And you don't see it again. That's it.
But they never showed the bowling alley because there's a bowling alley in the original ship schematics.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
Okay, let me get a few comments that have come in the last 10 minutes. Dan says that this is a brilliant discussion. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
We appreciate that. And says, for a long time, I've wished that they had introduced the life support belts that they use in the animated series. Funny, we talked about that last week, and we were saying the same thing.
Yeah. Dan, that there was actually behind the scenes discussion about life support belt for the original series, but as so many things, they couldn't make it look right in live action in the 60s. But they could draw it in the animation.
It wasn't actually last week that we talked about it. It's actually going to be like 2 weeks from now that we talked about that.
Oh, you're right.
Timey-wimey,
Spoilers for those who are listening in broadcast order and not in recording order. It's just like the original series.
Trust me, Chuck has been giving Veronica a hard time about that on Monkeying Around. So,
let's see. Wayne says, gosh, I just watched the entire third season, yet I feel like I didn't finish the homework. So much attention to detail, guys.
Well, thank you.
Hey, Wayne, while you're there, toss out your favorite and least favorite episodes of the series.
I was just going to say, Dan says that All Our Yesterdays is probably his favorite episode 3 or season 3 episode.
Wow.
Interesting pick.
One.
That's a strong one. I've always said that
I
felt like they should have left off Turnabout Intruder, and All Our Yesterdays should have been the finale.
Oh,
it's just a beautiful Spock McCoy story. I mean, you get some great characterization for Spock. One of the love interests for Spock that works. I don't care much for the Kirk plot when Kirk is in like the Salem witch trials or wherever he was at.
It's kind of the tone is off.
And when Mr. Atos is pushing him on the library cart, trying to shove him into the portal to get him back to time, that is just the most visual, stupid, funny moment.
I love
that.
Atos.
But Matt, they have great special effects and sound. I love it when Mr. Atos zaps Kirk with that little pin laser thing, and it goes, and it does that really cool pew woo, and he kind of bends over. But see, now you mentioned the witch thing, Charles. I love that because that one lady, you're right, she's in there. She keeps saying, "You're a witch, you're a witch."
This is a slight diversion, but when Alan launched his Doctor Who A to Z podcast, I was like, "Oh, ATOS would have been a good name for a Star Trek podcast."
Why didn't we think of that?
Right.
Oh my gosh, that was brilliant.
Speaking of Mr. Atos, that actor continues the tradition of a few actors playing 2 or 3 memorable roles in Star Trek, because he was also, what was his name? He was in Bread and Circuses.
Was it Septimus? Am I thinking of the wrong guy?
Yeah, it's Septimus, right? He played the leader of the Roman, the rebel slaves who basically believed in Jesus.
Right.
So 2 good roles for him.
Yeah, several. He had more than 2 good roles in All Our Yesterdays alone, because he played several ATOS.
Oh yeah,
I love when he keeps popping out and different little grumpy librarians coming out of different rooms.
And they have different personalities, because one of them is kind of nice, and then the one at the end, he's the one, "You're very late. Where have you been?" So you're right.
Yeah, I think it was how we knew it was a real one when he became a bit of a butthead, because he always was kind of polite. And then it's like, "What are you doing here? You're insane. You're supposed to be back in the past."
That show is also memorable. If I'm not mistaken, that is literally the only episode of the entire original series that did not have a scene on the Enterprise. Every single thing was, there was not one scene on the Enterprise, and that never happened before.
Interesting. Okay.
So how about we talk about the countdown a little bit? Because just like your first 2 seasons, you have some, dubious selections there. I don't think there's anything as egregious as you committed in the first season.
I'll never live that down.
No, you will not.
That's my scarlet letter. I wear that.
There you go.
But once again, I want to say I had no input on the order of this ranking. That's all.
Every man for himself, Matt.
Well, no, I mean, because I don't. He really knows the episode way more than I do. I'm just sometimes sort of along for the ride to see what's going to happen. But like, he's doing the ranking. I mean,
well, Elaine and Veronica, we're definitely going to want to get y'all's favorites also then.
Well, okay, but to the list, I want to start right at the top, because for me, my favorite season 3 episode is Enterprise Incident, and I think it's one of the best original series episodes total. And I always felt like Tholian Webb was good, but maybe a little slow. I don't know. I haven't watched it in a long time, so I really want to go back and reappraise it now. But I was surprised to find when you came up with Enterprise Incident at number 2, I'm like, what would outrank that? So I'm and that's one of the things that I enjoy about seeing people do this kind of thing, is to see different results and different reactions to things that, I've had the same reaction to something for 20 years, but it's nice to see somebody else have a different response to it and have a whole different set of favorites.
So these aren't necessarily my favorites, but these are the ones I remembered from my rewatch. And granted, I only got up to Plato's Stepchildren today, so I didn't even finish that, so I hadn't even gotten to the part where whoever was writing on Kirk. So
Dr. Lovelace.
But that one and The Earth is Hollow and I Touched the Sky, those both stood out to me, but because they quoted the title at the very beginning of the episode. Like, it wasn't like, this is the title of the episode and it's just a way to talk about it. No, they literally said that in the episodes, and I was like, that's weird. Like, the name of the episode shouldn't be a quote from the episode. I feel like that's really weird.
Well, how many times in Spock's brain did they actually say Spock's brain? Quite a few.
Well, at least they didn't name the episode Brain and Brain. What is brain?
That's what I should have opened with.
Oh gosh.
Hey, and Veronica, the guy you're talking about is funny. Yet another double role because the actor who did the whole "For the world is hollow and I have touched the sky," he was the actor in the Return of the Archons, the one where the festival where the people go crazy every night and party and destroy the town. He was the guy who made a joke about the lawgivers and got killed when they got zapped him with that empty tube. So he also had two roles in Star Trek.
Because he was in the
Three?
cage as well. He was
Oh, that's right.
he was one of the survivors at the encampment, or the survivors at the encampment.
That's right. Yeah. So Veronica, did you like For the World is Hollow and I've Touched the Sky?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the concept of there was someone that's a controller and it's something that they put into you and they don't have any problem with this at all whatsoever because that's just how it is. And they've forgotten about all this stuff because some stuff just wasn't passed down because of whatever reason. And
yeah, we never figured out why a whole group of people who were descended from astronauts forgot that they were astronauts' children and then became a death penalty to know that you were on a spaceship.
Yeah, I don't know how that computer got like reprogrammed like that or had a switch flipped accidentally. That's that part of it was weird, but I like the concept.
Yeah, that's a good episode.
Yeah,
it is.
And we were recently talking about that scene that on our Facebook group that you're talking about because I love that scene. It's when he describes being a young man and climbing to the top of the mountain and reaching up and and then he gives the line, "The world is hollow and I have touched the sky." It's beautiful.
Yeah,
I like it's the longest Star Trek title, I think, I don't think anyone's still top the length of that title. But then like we were talking about in our Facebook group, there's some things that just don't hold up, and I think in my opinion, he's very clearly made up to look Asian, and he's not. He's a white guy. And that's one of the things that was common in television at that time that doesn't hold up today. Like it may have been commonplace then, but I bump up against it now.
I did not think he was Asian at all.
Okay.
Yeah. Once Charles posted that picture and I looked at it, I realized for the first time in 50 some odd years, holy crap, you're right. He does look like he's made up.
The clothes and the wig and the makeup. Yeah. But earlier, Alan asked Matt a question and Veronica answered. So I'm curious what Matt, if you remember what his question was, I'm curious what your answer would have been.
It's probably the same answer.
What was the question again?
I don't even remember what I answered.
Well, just about your ranking and it's interesting to see different people's reactions to different things, and I don't even know what the question was.
Well,
so there you go.
I tend to group them in groups. You have like the top 4 or 5 episodes. In the first season, it was like the top 15, but here it was
kidding.
4 or 5. And then you had those that were good but flawed. And then you had those that were more flawed than good, but I could find something to like about. And then you had "And the Children Shall Lead and Turnabout Intruder." But so there are spots in the countdown where I said, okay, this is one of those gaps. This is one of those where like Alan says, he thinks Enterprise Innocent is number 1, and I could completely see that it was in that top group.
Yeah, sure.
But I like to joke is there are 9 top 10 episodes in my opinion in season 3 because there is a big gap between 10 and 9 in my estimation. Number 10 was Spectre of the Gun, and in no way, shape, or form should Spectre of the Gun should be a top 10 episode. It just happened to fall in that spot,
right?
In this group, I found some things I like about it, but. I don't want to consider Spectre of the Gun a top 10 episode because there's really only 9 episodes that I think are worthy of that title in the 3rd season.
Yeah, I totally get that rationale.
Yeah. In season 1, it was like, here's the bad one. And now,
the
for second place is 30 episodes.
You're right.
Yeah.
So true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna throw out a couple of episode titles that we haven't talked about yet and just get reaction from everybody. Okay, so Wink of an Eye.
You're gonna have to give me reference on these. I don't know episode titles.
Okay,
that's what
time accelerated aliens that take over the Enterprise.
Yes, and the Enterprise, they look like they're standing still because the aliens are going super fast.
Yes,
Veronica, that's the Kirk on the edge of the bed putting his clothes back on.
I'm sorry, the look of Veronica.
I wasn't going to go that saucy with it.
You didn't make it to that one, but we're talking about there's a scene where it cuts away and then it cuts back, and Kirk's putting his boots on and she's brushing her hair, which is you know what just happened.
Yeah, I know.
Alan, I think that's a solid episode. It's fun. I don't dislike it. I don't love it, but it's a fun episode. It's a fun sci-fi episode. You know, it's a very and it's not mediocre. It's just a really good, solid episode of Star Trek. I think I put that directly in the middle.
Yeah. I get you. Any other reactions to that one?
I like that one. I think it's fun. I think that she's a great guest character. I like the interplay, and I like it's a sci-fi trope, but I like that they're going so fast that they're frozen still. And I mean, how do you fight someone like that? You know,
exactly.
They can do whatever they want before you can push the button to tell someone that someone's on the ship.
Right.
They can dodge phaser beams.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What'd you think, Elaine? Did you like that one?
Yeah, I didn't hate it.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
yeah.
One real quick comment on A Wink of an Eye and For the World is Hollow and I've Touched the Sky. And man, I said this on Silver Reviews. Both of those episodes and many season 3 episodes have women in the leads as far as the alien races and communities.
Right.
You don't see women in command really in the Federation, but you have so many women in charge of groups, cults. In Wink of an Eye, she's the obvious leader. And For World and Hollow and I Touch the Sky, Natira is the leader of her people. And that's fairly progressive again for the 60s.
Well, and Enterprise incident.
Right.
With
Enterprise
Romulan
incident,
commander.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, next one. The Cloud Minders.
Ooh.
I like that one too.
One of my faves.
Okay.
Where's my notes? I'm looking for my notes. That one was one that I think if you had watched it as a kid, there may have been things that kind of you didn't quite understand or kind of would go over your head. But watching it as a kid, you know, it's really much the have and the have nots, and the have not understanding how hard it is to not have anything, or there's a lot more to it than you might have not noticed if you watched it when you were younger.
Right.
And so I like this one, but yeah, it was interesting. Yeah.
Okay.
It didn't score well on the Spock Dignity Index. Yeah, but I think there was some interesting direction and shots. It definitely was a very uniquely looking episode. The image of the cloud in the sky is very, very well done. I love that image. The odd scenes where they have like the faces of the rebel leader as they were contemplating their role in this, it was a very unique narration choice that really hadn't been done in Enterprise on Star Trek before.
Right.
So it's a good example of what I say. The third season took chances. It didn't always work. More times than not, it probably didn't work. But it took chances. It didn't rest on the formula that they had established in the second season, which is something that I've said. If you're going to criticize the second season, is that it did feel formulaic at times.
Yeah.
But I think this is a good example of an episode where they did take some chances. They did try to do something different with it.
Right. Do you know that one, Veronica?
No.
And it's interesting. In season 2, Spock was ready to die instead of tell his best friend and doctor that about the Ponfar.
Yeah.
Like he would rather die than tell his own doctor and his best friend, Captain Kirk. And then in season 3, he's like, "Hey, you've been Ponfar'd? You want to go Ponfar'd?"
And you know what's interesting about that is despite the illogic of Spock talking to her about the Ponfar, despite that, the actors have real chemistry and they have some of the best lines in that episode. And I kind of like to see a Vulcan attracted to a woman where it's not Ponfar. You know, it's not, because he is still, I'll start to say human. Vulcans still do have feelings. And so I kind of like that he was attracted to her. But I also like the scene where they're torturing Vana. And she literally is so incredibly clueless. Like you said, Elaine, she literally says, well, what else would she understand but pain? She's just so clueless defending torture. And even saying that her people don't know what to do with light, be living in the light and living out of the caves. And Spock's like, dude, seriously?
But those were a lot of the arguments that were used in race relations here in the U.S. in the past. They wouldn't know what to do with the equality if they were given to it. They have somehow that there's some lesser version of humans.
They live that way because they want to live that way.
Right. Yes. So I think that's a deliberate parallel. I think it's to this episode's credit that they tried to make that case in a science fiction way.
Yeah.
And another female leader, Anvana, who's one of the leaders of the Disruptors.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, speaking of race relations, I can't believe that we've gone this long in our episode and we have not talked about Last Battleground. So, I mean, that's the one that everybody references,
right?
As the standout, Star Trek is woke kind of thing. But, so what more is there to say about it? But I'm curious to know how we react to that one.
It loses me a little bit when they're kind of running down the halls and the that goes on a bit too long. I'm like, oh, okay, I get it, I guess, but it's like they didn't quite know how to end that episode.
Frank Gorshin has the funniest run I've ever seen, too.
He would fit right in the animated series.
Yes. There's a blooper reel where Frank Gorshin and the other actor running around, they decided to bump into each other because they thought it was ridiculous. They were running around the ship and nobody was catching them. So the actors literally ran into each other and crashed to the floor just for kicks.
Oh, wow. I mean, in my opinion, that one works because it distills the moral message down to an absurd term.
Yeah.
Where they just look at him and say, you look like you're the same species to us. Like you would think aliens would have come to America in the 1960s and said, what are you talking about? You're the same species.
Absolutely.
You have all got two thumbs. Like, what are you talking about?
Right.
But it is. It's one of those things. It is that absurd if you were to step out of of our context and look at it. And so, I mean, these guys, the colors of their face were swapped, and so they're mortal enemies. But yeah, I mean, here on Earth, we could learn something from that.
Right.
True.
Oh, hey, I know which one you're talking about now.
Oh, good.
Yeah, black on one side, white on the other side.
Okay, couple of comments. I'm sorry, were you going to say something, Matt?
No, I was just going to say, think about when that episode would have been written and come out, late 1968 specifically. Think about the assassinations. Think about the riots. Think about, I mean, I could see how they were people who were a little bit more idealized earlier on when writing the show might have been a little depressed at how violent and how dark things were getting by that year. And I think that's reflected in the ending of this episode.
Yeah,
as a matter of fact, I forget which riot, might have been the Watts riot, but the scenes of burning that they flash are real life scenes from a real life American riot. They just splice into the episode.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have a lot of subtlety, but it does have the feeling of someone saying, like, all right, fine, let's put it this way.
Right. Yeah.
This is bad.
Right. And you're thinking about that period in the 60s too, but even when you get up to All in the Family, which was a 70s show, they deal with really hard-hitting subject like these, but they don't do it with a lot of subtlety because you've got 25-ish minutes. You got to get your point across. In Star Trek's case, it's 50 minutes.
Right.
But you're taking a subject that's been going on for ever. And boiling it down to that key point.
One really quick comment, Alan. So I know you got to get the questions. What you just said is a good point. Some of y'all might remember back in the 90s, there was the genocide in Africa between the Hutus and the Tutsis, two races in Africa. To this day, if you put a gun to someone's head, most people couldn't tell the difference between them because they're both Africans. And I may be wrong when I say this. I think the Hutus tended to be shorter and a little broader, and the Tutsis tended to be taller and leaner. Who the heck's going to notice that difference? So to the outside world, it was just two black African groups killing each other. And to them, I saw interviews with people, and they were literally like, what are you talking about? Don't you dare confuse me with those people. Of course I cut that guy up with a machete. He's the other side. Yeah. And I'm sitting here as a black American going, well, so much for the motherland being the paradise. So
Right. Okay, a couple of interesting comments. We have Dan says about female representation. There's also that controversial line in Turnabout Intruder.
Yes. Oh, we didn't get to that one, Dan, but good point.
He says not only, and this is about a point that Keith was making earlier, not only do Vulcans have emotions, but Spock is also half human.
True.
And don't Vulcans like feel things stronger than
Yes.
humans even?
Right.
Oh,
they just learn how to control it and keep it all
because
bottled up
emotionally
inside.
They're very tempestuous.
As a matter of fact, Veronica, I have all long felt that people talk about Klingons and Nausicaans and Andorians. I think Vulcans are literally the most violent race that we've seen in Star Trek among the major races, but they just hold it back. Because you saw what happened with Spock in All Our Yesterdays.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Michael Phillips says the most well-written episode of season 3 is There in Truth No Beauty.
Wow. That is a great episode.
Yeah, it really is.
That one shot up in my rewatch this time. I mean, I think I would have had it more middle of the season, but I think I had it number 3. I mean, it really shot up.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, it introduced the concept of the Idic.
Yeah.
It introduced the Medusans, which we have again in new Star Trek.
Yes.
Yeah, it did a lot of interesting, and it also, believe it or not, indicates some of the issues with Gene Roddenberry because Spock was wearing an Idic, and the reason the character was wearing an Idic is because Gene Roddenberry created the Idic symbol and then marketed it to make some money off of it.
Right. That's right.
Nimoy was pissed about that.
Okay, and then finally, Dan says Mike Sussman has commented that he doesn't like how the moralizing in Let This Be Your Last Battlefield slams the viewer over the head, and Dan tends to agree. Yes, that's true, but at the same time, there were very few shows in 1968 who were saying this kind of thing.
Yes.
If you're going to say it, by God, say it.
Yep.
A funny thing in terms of memes, that episode of Star Trek Battlefield is often described by people with a line from another episode of Star Trek. It is called the Bonk Bonk episode. From Miri, bonk bonk on the head. And when people talk about Battlefield, they almost always say, yeah, that's the bonk bonk on the head episode.
Right.
Because of the message.
Yeah.
Dan,
okay.
I just want to get real quick. Dan throws in, speaking of Medusans, # save Star Trek Prodigy.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Here.
Well, guys, this hour has flown by.
Wow.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even touch on most of the episodes, but I would say if anyone wants to continue the conversation, I mean, drop by our Facebook group or drop by the Elaine and Matt Watch TV Facebook page.
Yeah.
And comment. I mean, I'd love to keep talking about season 3 of Star Trek because I like this. I mean, it's my favorite TV show of all time. But I mean, there's a lot to discuss in it. There's a lot to discover in it as we grow older and new people watch it and bring their own perspectives to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Amen.
Did anyone have any closing thoughts about the season they wanted to get out there before we close this thing down?
I haven't watched season 3 in a million years. And so I had already been thinking about maybe doing a rewatch of season 3. So maybe I'll post my reactions and see how different they are from Matt's.
Please do.
No, I'm not doing that. We don't need a second run through of season 3 episodes. Maybe I'll just do a overall reaction at the end. Who knows?
Okay.
My quick response would be, I'll pick it back on Alan said, it's a memorable season even if you haven't seen it. And I think what you find is the highs are actually pretty high and the lows are really low. Overall, it's not as bad a season as its reputation. It has some real stinker episodes, but overall, it's a very good season of Star Trek, especially given what was going on behind the scenes.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Elaine and Matt, where can people find more of you guys?
Oh, okay. You can find us on our Facebook page, Elaine and Matt Watch TV, where we chronicle what we're watching on our TV.
I want EMTV.
Okay, I didn't expect that.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. And
you got us.
And before we move away from that, Dan has one final question. He wants to know what your next review project is going to be. And on private elsewhere, we have talked about maybe you guys reviewing TAS or Matt doing a review, like a ranking of TAS. What do you think? What's
a
your
little
plans?
more challenging. I don't know that I can write 3 paragraphs on each episode as I did on the show. Just a simple amount of content. But I'm gonna put something out. I have been ranking them as we watch them, so I'll be prepared to do a countdown.
Come on, Matt. Matt, you can write a book about Mud's passion. Come on. Love crystals? Come on, man.
Oh, that's so much pain in that episode. But
yeah, the pain is in watching it.
yeah, exactly.
All right. Yeah, so where else can people find more of you? I think I got lost in that a little bit. So where can they find you guys?
You can also find me at Monkeying Around.
Oh.
And what is that?
A podcast about the monkeys.
Yay!
All right, Alan, where can people find more of you?
Look for my music podcast, which is Modern Musicology. We have got a bunch of great things coming out very soon. An episode about the 50th anniversary of Dark Side of the Moon, one of the greatest albums ever recorded, and lots of other great stuff that's happened. And then also look for my Doctor Who podcast, Doctor Who ATOS.
And how about you, Keith?
You can find me on X and Instagram and Facebook, primarily the ESO Network Facebook groups.
And how about us, Veronica?
Feltnerdy.com.
And?
Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
And if you're at Dragon Con, you can find us all over the place at Dragon Con. So search for us in the app because we've got shows and we're going to be all over. Or just watch for people running by with puppets in their arms. And just follow. Go with some more fun, I promise.
Right. And I should say, I will be at Dragon Con too, and I've got quite a load of panels going, and a couple of them in the Star Trek panel room. And both of the ones that I'm doing sound really good. I'm very excited to do them. So look for me.
I'll be on a panel at Dragon Con as well.
Ooh, where?
Great.
Brit Track.
Which one?
Brit Track. Red Dwarf.
Awesome.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Yes.
All right. And Veronica, where can people find you individually?
So I have a Facebook page, Daba Woman. It's primarily our more adult puppetry exploits and
not safe for work.
Not safe for work. And
depends on the job.
and kind of my general theater stuff that I do. And I also started TikTok, Daba Woman 8. And you can find me on there. Been doing some Star Trek talk abouts and they have some weird filters on there where you can turn into a Klingon. They all look terrible. And some cute videos of Muffet. So kind of check me out. Daba Woman on TikTok. Daba Woman 8.
8.
Right.
8.
Don't look for those other 7 Dabo women.
No.
Just the 8th one.
And do you have a closing for us this week?
Brain? What is brain?
Hey, perfect.
Hey, look at that. All right,
Thanks, everybody.
We should say that we're going to be live again next Thursday night. So come watch for us. We're going to be doing a discussion about all of the great crossover episodes in Star Trek.
That's right.
If one character crossed over into another series, if one series docks on a station from a different series, we're going to talk about them all.
That's right.
All right. So see you then. Everybody take care. Have a good night.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.